successful estate, but and we certainly quizzed them in great detail as about whether it was an appropriate place. And in fact, they asked us to try and speed along the planning, which I'm now glad to say that they do have now the correct planning in place. So, but they are still based at Riverside House. But the part that we thought we should actually bring to Cabinet was actually the reason why they'd had to move. And it was because MPH had decided to change the, and this was from the Borough Council, change the occupation of the rest of the building. They were leasing the ground floor, I believe, to change it to accommodation and rather than office space. But there seems to have been quite a lack of consultation with the renal service as occupiers, and despite great efforts they took, that it was not. They felt it wasn't safe from an infection control point of view, that the actual entrance to the building would then be used by all of the occupants of the accommodation. And certainly in the building process, the noise, dust, etc., was not conducive to the sort of work that they were carrying out. So I think it was reporting that there should be a learning experience, really, as to the consultation that we should have undertaken and the support that we should have given those leases, especially since they are actually partners. So they've taken the opportunity of a break clause in the lease to actually move out, and they will be moving to this industrial site. But as I say, we quizzed them most carefully. They'd consulted with their patients. They run a 24-hour service, and certainly where it's actually located is very important to them, because they need good access both for car parking and public transport, because if a patient is late, they're literally running 3 shifts, 3 8-hour shifts. They need to be able to prepare for the dialysis, have a patient on dialysis, and then clean the machine afterwards. And if a patient is half an hour late, they'll lose a whole shift. So it was very important to them to have good links with transport and so on. So we were very impressed, actually. We quizzed them most carefully, but they did want to bring forward this thought that they felt that they'd not had the support that they should have had by their landlords, basically, and felt that they'd been pushed out somewhat.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm not sure if anyone wants to respond to this. Do you want to comment briefly, Adam? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that even though the decision predates West Northamptonshire Council, I'm very happy to go back to Northampton Partnership Homes to see if there are any learnings that can be taken from the experience, and whether or not we might be able to work in partnership better than seems to have been the case during this redevelopment exercise.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rosie. And again, thanks to the committee. Don't see Councillor Guildford. We'll move on to our last 2 speakers, Councillor Purser and Stone. Just to comment, this is by no means directed at Councillor Herring, but it was a comment I meant to make at the start. We have 10 items, an average of 3 speakers. That's 90 minutes without even discussing a report. So we're looking for brevity and lack of repetition. And what is that they say on just a minute? We're looking to move through speeches concisely if we could. So if I can call Councillor Purser, please, to come next.
I hope my comments will duplicate what the chair of scrutiny says. I just want to reinforce the point of consulting ward councillors early in the process. I think that was learning from the committee, that on whether a development, we consult and we do it early. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the conciseness. Councillor Stone, is Councillor Stone with? Ah, yes.
Thank you. I wanted to say review and scrutiny recommendations on the agenda. So thank you for that. I just wanted to ask though, why we had a call in looking at the highways contract. It was a joint call in for place and corporate scrutiny, and there were recommendations made at that. So I'm just wondering why that hasn't been included in tonight's agenda. And just for your information, the two recommendations that I remember the most, because it caused the most discussion, but was agreed, that with the highways contract, the money is, it's a lot of money. We want to follow the money and see where it ends up. And we were pleased that there was a big weighting in the tender documents for social value, not big enough in my view, but more of a weighting in the actual bid that came through. So that was excellent, I think, but we wanted that to be a bit more specific. So we wanted it to specify what the social value was rather than giving us a percentage.
I think we'd welcome, we have plenty on the agenda. We wouldn't get into the highways contract specifically under this item, but nevertheless, promise you, even if it doesn't come formally to a meeting, if we, have you had anything from scrutiny? Phil, can you confirm?
No, there's been no formal report from scrutiny to us as yet, although there was recommendations as far as I remember, but it hasn't come in the way of a report so far to Cabinet. So perhaps we need to find out what scrutiny have done with that report and why they haven't brought it to us. But can I just say I welcome, I know there's nobody here to speak, but I do welcome the comments and the outcome of the call in with regard to the levelling up fund, and I do think that there's some positive stuff there that we need to work on, and happy to take it away and come back with a formal response in due course.
Very good. Thank you, Phil. Let's move on then. I think our recommendation is that Cabinet notes those. Can I just ask you to confirm that those recommendations are agreed? Is agreed? Thank you. In which case we move on to item 7. This is Youth Justice Plan. We have 3 speakers in this order. Councillor Beardsworth is first, Councillor Harris, and then Councillor Stone. Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief, but I think I welcome the report. And also I welcome the fact that we are working with children to stop them offending. But we need to have more youth service to actually stop it. Prevention is better than cure in my book. And I think it's so much better if we can have some youth workers to work in the community to stop a lot of these things like knife crime, getting people involved in playing sport, doing all sorts of things like that. We really need to do more of that level of stuff rather than waiting for somebody to offend and then try and correct them. And I know they do work with both sides, but I think we just need to see if we can invest in some more youth workers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker then is Councillor Harris. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, councillors. Just a few points. Again, I'll be brief if I possibly can be. It's good to see that there is an uplift in spend and investment in this area. Arguably, though, it is barely inflationary, which is obviously concerning. I will refer to a statistic which I have raised at council before on a fairly recent YMCA report, which indicates that Northamptonshire as a whole has the 14th lowest spending authority on youth services. That's out of 173 councils. It equates to £7.38 per young person, and it's seen a 94% reduction since 2010. There are 2 particular items, 8.9 and 8.31 in the report, which are extremely concerning, which indicates that we are above national average and regional average on custodial sentences. And we are seeing a serious issue around serious youth violence. I think this is a real example of as you sow, so shall you reap. And I really urge the council, despite the fact that we know that we are ourselves facing as a council serious challenges, as per usual, I'm sure, But I really do think we should look at this matter and seek to find money where we possibly can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. And finally, Councillor Stone, Danielle.
Thank you, Chair. It's always a pleasure to read this report, you know, because it's always really packed full of information and really, really well presented. So it's very accessible and I commend it. There are some issues there, aren't there? It's really disturbing to find we've got such a huge increase in number of young people who are offending, who are also the victims of offending. I think it's really, really worrying to see the statistics and how that relates to poverty and to young people being brought up in areas of disadvantage. And those facts and figures in the report are really illuminating, I think. So out of 31 areas of disadvantage in WNC, 30 are in Northampton. This is serious. I feel the weight of that in my ward every day. I feel it every day. I'm a bit curious about some of the figures though, because I'm not sure I'm reading them right. So if you bear with me, we've got 20,000 young people living in low-income families, 17 in out-of-work benefit families, and 1,700 in households that have got the benefit cap applied. I'm pretty sure that 1,700 are mostly made up of families on benefit who've had a third or fourth child, and that's the cap. I think that's an outrageous figure to be looking at, you know, because babies being born, they have no control, do they? Whether they're the third, fourth or fifth child. It's a really invidious cap, it seems to me. But I just want to know whether we've got 20,000 children living in poverty or 39. So I'd like some clarification on that. Totally agree with what Councillor Harris was saying. The county closed the youth service in 2007, 2008. It took £4 million out of the budget, away from children and young people at that time. And we are definitely seeing the outcome of that in these horrendous statistics. We do need to be investing a lot more in children and in young people, but we also need to be listening to them more. I have sent round to some people documents that I found from 2007, where young people were being consulted and where recommendations were being made for investment in youth services and nothing ever happened. We had a report on youth crime coming out of scrutiny at the borough in 2019. Again, young people were consulted, recommendations were made and nothing has happened. So what I would say is we need to listen to young people. We need to understand what they're saying, and then we need to take action to improve their lives. 8.32 of this report made me extremely, extremely angry. And I'd like to explain why. It's looking for reasons why young people become criminalised within families and within that young person. And for me, that misses the point. Most of what happens to all of us, not just to young people, is contextually related. So I think we should be looking at ourselves, to be honest.
At that point, we're
if I could just
3.5 minutes. I don't think you can actually. No, I'm ever so sorry. We really have got to take time.
Well,
you have
I'll
important
send
points
this
to make.
you.
This is not the format. Let's have a bigger discussion. Thank you. Can I call to Fiona to introduce or highlight, maybe answer some of the queries raised? Thank you.
I just very quickly going to pass over to Stuart, because we actually do take on board the comments that we do need to engage more with the youth of our area, and we have already started planning that work, and it has been at the planning stage, but we are moving forward now. So I'll just pass to Stuart so he can give you a bit of an outline.
Thank you, Councillor Baker, and thank you, councillors, for raising the issues within the youth offending plan. We acknowledge that we need to take forward an action really to start to really bring together the youth provision that we have got locally. We will be bringing forward a report to Cabinet probably in November that allows us to seek cabinet permission to progress with bids against the Youth Investment Fund. We have 5 wards in Northampton which are eligible in relation to youth centre funding. As part of that, we will be proposing that we establish a cross-party youth board that allows us to really understand the needs that we have locally and start to collaborate and bring together what will be a future youth offer for West Northants. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments on this, Fiona, on the report as a whole? No?
No.
That's great. Thank you. In which case, if I may draw the Cabinet's attention to the recommendations on this report.
Do you want me to just outline the?
I thought.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you were saying. I beg your pardon. The youth offending plan, as you can see, is presented by Cabinet today and outlines several key areas. Our youth offending service sits within Northampton's Children's Trust, Northamptonshire's Children's Trust, and works with children and young people across the whole of Northamptonshire. YOS and the partnership follow a child first and whole family approach, and whilst there remains many challenges, certainly in relating to serious youth violence, there is progress being made in some areas to ensure children and young people are supported and, where appropriate, diverted to avoid criminalisation and stigma. The plan outlines several areas where innovation has been used to improve areas of practice. For example, the implementation of the Alternative to Custody panel, which was introduced in 2021, which works to ensure as few young people as possible are retained in custody. However, there remains challenges, and we have seen an increase since last year of young people being identified as suspects or offenders, and youth violence continues to be a serious concern and a priority. A new serious youth justice pilot will be developed in the Wellingborough area to start to find ways to address this issue. Strategic priorities are around reducing the number of first-time entrants, reducing reoffending, and protecting the public from harm and decreasing serious violence. So the report is, as Councillor Stone said, full of statistics for you to look at. So I don't think I need to go through that. It's very clearly written for you to see. So I will recommend this report to Cabinet.
Thank you. Does anybody have any other comments at all or questions on this? It will come back to us if you like, because the recommendation is that Cabinet recommends it to the Council to approve. So there'll be some discussion there. Yeah. On that basis, then, can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to that recommendation? Is that agreed? Thank you very much. That takes us on to item 8, which is the Local Council Tax Reduction Scheme. 3 speakers. The first one is Councillor Harris, followed by Councillor Stone, and then Councillor Randall. Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Fairly brief point, I think. Good to see that we are at least maintaining the same level in this proposal as last year. One question that I have and would like to raise is, obviously we harmonised these rates originally for this year's budget, and we saw in particular South Northants, I think was originally at 8%. And I'd just like to know if we have any measures or KPIs in place to be able to understand what impact that may have had by changing the rate to 20%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure what we'll do is take the speakers, come back with comments. It may be possible to comment on that or to get back to you. Let's bring our next speaker, Councillor Stone, if we may. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As a Northampton councillor, you would expect me to be pleased that we're holding the line on this. So I just wanted people to hear that. I am pleased about that. I am a bit bothered about the complexity of the systems we operate now. And I understand why they are complex, obviously. But it does mean that people in hardship have to work really, really hard to cope with their poverty. It's getting harder and harder. And I just wonder how the information gets to the right people, because obviously there are people in hardship who are not taking up the opportunity to have their council tax reduced, or they're not taking up the opportunity to have a top up from the hardship fund. So I think there are still issues about how we connect with people. I also think when we're looking at things like this, I'm always interested in how much it costs to deliver the service. Nothing comes for free, does it? And I'm really interested because I think one of the balancing acts that we all have to do is to measure that somehow. So how much does it cost to collect council tax and to deal with debt, but also to deal with those waivers, you know, and the hardship fund? I'd be really interested if we could somehow have some more information about that. That'd be interesting.
Okay, thank you. It might be that we get some response this evening or with further information to provide. Last speaker, Councillor Randall. Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question that I've often used to bring up when we was at DDC. And although it's remained at 20%, obviously there's still quite an increase because there was an increase across everything involved in the council tax. And I've seen it before that it's then plunged people below that poverty line. So I just want to be assured that with the 20% on the increase of the council tax, that hasn't happened. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wendy. Thanks to all our speakers. Malcolm and perhaps Martin, did you want to highlight from the report and possibly see if we can pick up any of those queries?
Yeah, I'll take a quick point now, Chair. Thank you. What I was going to say here is that we just really extended it from the previous year, and as far as we can observe, it seems to have gone pretty well. I would point out for Danielle that if you look at 7.11, there's some figures there for you. And the other thing I think is worthy of note from Wendy's point of view, and anybody else that can pick this up, is that there is, of course, a hardship fund, as we all know, and we keep promoting it, but in fact, it's very little take up of it. So I think the point of how does this message get through to people is probably the soundest one, actually, but it's there, and it's there for a purpose, and so should be used. It's really but as for going back to the report, it's a continuum of what we had before, and that seems to work pretty well. And with regard to the difficulty and complexity of the report, then we'll be dealing that on an item a bit later on in this evening as well, of how we intend to improve that or make it quicker. So that's really all I've got to say. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Malcolm. Any other cabinet comments at all or observations? No? Okay, this one. Oh, sorry, Adam, please.
Just a very quick point, Chairman, to say that I think it's very welcome that despite some of the challenges that we do face as a council, we continue to prioritise helping those who are least well off, and the continuation of our council tax reduction scheme is an example of that. So I fully support this, and it's good to see that we've got some cross-party consensus on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Adam. This one again goes to council. The recommendations is that we note the contents of the report. We approve the proposed CTRS as outlined in the report, and then we recommend to council a no change approach. So based on those recommendations, if there are no further questions, can I ask the Cabinet to confirm their agreement? Is it agreed? Very good. Thank you very much. Takes us on to item 9. This is establishing the new 250 place all through special educational needs school. We have 3 speakers. First of all, Councillor Beardsworth, Councillor Barrett and Councillor Randall. Sally, over to you.
Chair, I'm not going to go on in length about this because basically I understand why there is a need. My only concern is the length of journey time that the pupils will have to take if they're coming in or being bussed in. That's these children need care and attention. And if they're being bussed in from all over the county, I want to know how long their day will be on top of their educational needs.
Okay, thank you. A lot of them will have a shorter journey, Fiona, won't they? Sorry, please do, if you wish to chip in now.
This school is priority for West Northamptonshire Council. We currently have school in Northampton. The idea of putting this one out on the A43 in Tiffield was to actually move it further down our district so that we would actually be reducing the amount of time that currently some young people are travelling. And I agree with you, travelling long distances is never a good idea for children who have special needs. So the idea of putting it there was in order to address that completely.
And also to avoid the fact that we currently use out of county placements, which would be an even longer journey. Am I
Yes.
right in that, Fiona? Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sally. So our next speaker then is Councillor Barrett. Harry, welcome.
Thank you. I'll just pick up on that point actually. Past experience, I was a Senko and Director of Inclusion for large parts of my career, and we were having to send out students to Oxfordshire, to Reading, playing on what Fiona's just said there, and the journey times for those children was upwards of 2 hours, some of them. So I really commend that aspect of what we're doing here. I think it's fantastic. It's absolutely needed. I can't tell you that enough for those that aren't directly involved in education in this room. We've got an increasing need, which is getting more and more each year. Our EHCP numbers are increasing, etc., etc. But then that comes to the needs there, the provisions there, great. How are we going to staff it? So what measures are we taking to fill these positions? Because we need excellence in those positions. We need to make sure that the placement works. So then we're not having to then find and refinance. Sometimes I've had students upwards of 6 figures, £100,000 a year plus for placements in Oxfordshire, for example, because of that placement breakdown. So how are we ensuring that those specialists are excellent in their field? And then secondly, I've heard lots of rumours along the rumour mill. Is there a plan to broker the school into a MAT? And if so, is that something that's in the pipeline, etc., which MATs have been discussed? Or are we keeping that as into a local authority entity long term? And then the range of need within that school is quite big, and I get why, because of the needs increasing. However, I'm just a little concerned around certain students with certain conditions may find themselves isolated within that, and that might become a reluctancy to attend, and then an additional barrier. So wholly positive, that move, and I really commend West Northamptonshire and the work done on that so far, because as I say, from someone who's in the classroom every day, it's incredibly needed, and I just want to get it right, and I want us to make sure that we get it right together. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Harry. Should we see if we can respond to any other points that come up? Because we've got one more speaker. I'm sure you want to chip in, Fiona, which is Councillor Randall. Wendy?
Thank you, Chairman. This statement has come from the West Northampton Action Group, and they've asked me if I could read it out on their behalf. Our concern is that many of the autistic children who are in independent out of county schools are those who cannot cope in a mainstream environment, but do not have significant learning difficulties or speech delays. With this being an ASD, SLCN, SLD school, it is very likely to be similar to what is already available in local maintained special schools and units. And while more places of this type are sorely needed, it is unlikely to provide a viable alternative to many of the children who are currently in independent schools. There is a huge gap in provision in this county for children who are cognitively able but need an alternative to a mainstream environment, particularly but not limited to children with a PDA profile of autism. Children without significant cognitive impairments, but with high levels of need associated with ASD, especially those up to the age of around 7 or 8, and then post 16, really have no maintained options locally that can provide an appropriate level of learning and a suitable peer group. These children are frequently ending up out of education altogether. We would like to suggest that this group of children is carefully considered
because if provision for this group is not made at this school, many will still have nowhere to go, and those who are independent out of county schools will have to stay there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Okay, Fiona, over to you, just to highlight some of the key parts of this and perhaps respond to some of those points if you wish.
Probably what I'm going to say does respond to most of the things, and I think how we move forward with the trusts, with the school, etc., and staff, etc., will come further on. So, but I've highlighted that in what I'm about to say. As we're aware, there's a huge demand for special school places in West Northamptonshire and across all of the county. This is fueled by a significant increase in demand for specialist places, increased identification of needs, and increasing complexity of needs, coupled with a lack of capital investment historically. The number of EHCPs has increased from 2,587 in 2021 to 3,046 to date this year. The council is working with local and national education and SEND leaders to develop a number of expansions to meet the growing need. A major strand of this work is commissioning the new 250 place special school in Tiffield. The key messages for the special school are: initial feasibility costs suggest that the school will cost in the region of 23 million to build. This figure is obviously subject to final feasibility report, which will be commissioned once the trust is selected to run the school. The costs could also vary in line with inflationary, I was going to say inflammatory, but it's kind of similar, increases. The council is seeking borrowing of 10 million, again subject to final costs. The remaining 13 million will be funded through existing grants. There will be some cost avoidance savings, which will reduce the pressure on high needs block, as the cost of a place at the new school will be around £25,000 compared to an average cost of £61,000 in an independent school. And I just want to say here that from the outset, we had no intention of removing children from schools they were happy in and thriving in order to go to this school. We have a need that is ongoing, and that will be covered by this new school. Some people have already said to us that they would like their children to move, to be nearer home, etc. But those that are thriving well in where they are will not be expected to move to this school. The council has recommended a preferred trust following a rigorous selection process. This is laid out by the Department of Education, and they will make the final decision within the next few weeks. We have interviewed many trusts. We have put our recommendation to the Department of Education. It is their decision, and they will tell us, come back and tell us if they approve of our recommendation or if they recommend we use someone else. The proposed site for the school is Tiffield St John's, and there's a separate paper coming upon later, which I'm leaving in the very capable hands of my colleague, Councillor Longley, to discuss the lease arrangements. I'm sure, like me, you will be fully supportive of this paper, as well as fulfilling our obligations. This plan will give those young people a better chance to thrive and live their best lives.
Thank you. Thank you, Fiona. Does any other cabinet member have any other comments or questions on this one? Adam, comment, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think when we took when you took the decision to hold this meeting following the death of Queen Elizabeth, this was top of the agenda in terms of the items of urgent business that we wanted to get done, such as the pressing need for these sorts of school places. And I think we need to note as well that some of the valuable contributions that we've heard from the floor this evening as well, just highlighting some of the very specific and very informed concerns that have come our way. And I'm sure Councillor Baker, as someone who's so passionate and so engaged with these issues, will take those on board and continue to press away for specific educational provision for the kind of issues that these young people do face. So I commend Councillor Baker on the work that she's put into this. I know that she's driven this forward with immense passion and dedication, and she should be applauded for that.
Thank you. Fiona, you wanted to comment on?
I neglected to mention, and I did mean to, that I really could not have got this paper to you today without the support of people that I've had helping me along the way. And I really want to mention Chris Kiernan, who's no longer working for us, but was our interim at the time, because he really took up my wish to have this school and ran with it. And we wouldn't be at this stage without his assistance, and obviously all of his team as well in there. And also I have to thank Malcolm, obviously, Councillor Longley, for looking at my finance case and seeing it was worthy, and for Martin, obviously, for supporting that, because it has been a big challenge for all of us. So just want to thank all of those people. It couldn't be here without all of them.
Thank you, Fiona, and quite right. Thanks to everybody. This is a tremendous thing to do, and as Adam rightly says, there is an urgency just to keep momentum going on this. Yeah, lovely. Don't see any further hands for comment, in which case I just direct your attention back to the recommendations, which is about noting the selection process that Fiona mentioned. Note the use of St John's Tiffield site and agree in principle around the borrowing. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement? Are those agreed? Thank you. That's great. Takes us on to item 10, which is the Hackney Carriage tariff fare increase. We have one speaker, Councillor Sally Beardsworth. Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I have some concerns because I had to ask for the meeting to go ahead to do the carriage tariff, because I've been contacted by Hackney drivers saying they were struggling with the cost of living, with the increase in fuel and things like that. Now I've been on licensing now for probably 25 years, and we used to have regular meetings every 6 weeks to discuss things. We don't have those anymore. And I just wondered if we could possibly go back to the good old days when we used to have a meeting so we could find out how licensing was progressing and other issues that pertain to licensing. We have our sub meetings, but they're very much challenged into looking into specific cases. So I think it's very important that we do this. I mean, I wasn't aware, Chair, that we don't have an out of hours officer for environmental health until the other day. So how can we look at noise nuisance that happens at night? So it's important that we understand the staffing arrangements, what's going on in licensing, so we can make sure that we do the job properly. So I'm hoping we can go back to the good old days when we had it every 6 weeks or 2 months, so we could find out what's happening and do the job properly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's hand over to David then, who may respond to some of those points and also pick up any other points within the report. David.
Thank you, Chair. Sally, I'll pick up with you after the meeting on those points. Yes. So yeah, just a bit of background. So we as an authority have the legal power to set the maximum fares that Hackney Carriages charge in our area. We've got the table of tariffs in the report. At present, Hackney Carriages, those basically, those that I'm sure you all know, but Hackney Carriages is the cab that you can hail, rather than private hire vehicles, which need to be pre-booked. They operate primarily in Northampton and Daventry. I don't think actually there's any Hackney Carriages in the former South Northampton area. Previously, we had separate tariffs operating across the sovereign areas, and it was planned to harmonise these during the development of the new licensing policy. However, we've been approached by a number of drivers who've expressed concerns about the rising cost of fuels, etc., and of course the impact on their livelihoods. And we decided that it would be sensible to bring forward this aspect of the harmonisation. The teams have reviewed fares and a proposed tariff structure, which gives an increase in all areas, but restricts this hopefully to a moderate level, bearing in mind the challenges that we're all facing. Believe that this balanced approach is the right thing to do, and the licensing committee discussed this in July and have now put this forward to us as Cabinet for our ratification. It's worth noting that these are the maximum levels that can be charged per mile. And it may be that drivers charge less or agree a set charge for specific journeys. If the proposal is approved this evening, the fare structure will be advertised, and obviously any objections will be considered before the tariff is brought into force. So that concludes, and you have the recommendation in front of you.
Very good. Thank you, David. Any cabinet member want to ask any questions or make any comments on this at all? There's one recommendation, which is that we agree the tariffs, which we hope strike a balance between affordability for users and recognising the increased costs and so on for inflation for taxi drivers. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to that recommendation? Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much. Takes us on to item 11, which is the award of a transitional contract for highways professional services. On this one, we have two speakers, Councillor Harris and then Councillor Randall. So Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to just say thanks to Nick Henstock for actually clarifying some points on this following a meeting with Martin last week. It's a significant figure, this additional contract, and I'd like to know, it's not actually clear from the papers whether or not this is new spend or part of budgeted spend. In the response from Nick, he suggested around 50% of the fund will come from developer contributions, but it's not clear exactly whether the remaining balance is actually already budgeted for or whether it is new spend. So that's my first point. The second is wanting to make sure, obviously, that there are clear monitoring processes in place, because this is due to be, from my understanding, a fairly short-term arrangement. So it's really to be sure that that spend is correct and it isn't going to exceed that. And a final point really is that these works, obviously, I assume, will be taken up by Kia, or this type of work, I should say, not these specific projects, in due course of part of their new contract arrangement. And it seems strange, one of these items actually won't be commenced until next year, next spring, which is the transport model. So again, I'm not entirely clear why that isn't something that's fallen straight over to Kia and why it needs to be handed to WSP. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Randall, Wendy, are you happy that no further comments? Yeah, thank you. In which case we'll hand over to Phil. You were going to mention perhaps first, Phil, the recollection on that scrutiny item that Danielle answered first, maybe, but certainly some.
Yeah, can I just go back to the question Councillor Stone asked about the recommendations, or I think it was Councillor Stone, about the recommendations surrounding the contract and how that was going to be monitored. We did, in fact, if memory serves me right, sorry, I forgot about this at the time, we did actually have, that was a call-in, and we did have the call-in fed back to us. We didn't accept the call-in and the decision went ahead. But I don't recall any recommendations separate to that. If there are recommendations separate to that, then perhaps we can have them referred to us at a future meeting.
Actually, I think Catherine
found anything
clarify
out
on
in
this,
the interim, but that was my understanding. I forgot about that, and I'm sorry I didn't say so at the time.
Catherine, would you like to add to that?
Just to say, I have received a report with recommendations from the scrutiny committee. I reviewed the recommendations, but unfortunately the way that they were drafted was not specific enough to enable them to be implemented. So I made comments on them that simply said things like, it wasn't clear what was meant by major contracts. It wasn't clear what was meant by strategic plans. So I had intended that those comments would be fed back to Danielle Stone and we could clarify the recommendations and then bring them forward to cabinet, but that hasn't happened and I apologise for that. So I was just writing an explanation to Danielle, and I will sit down with her and try and see if we can't improve the quality of the recommendations so that we can bring them forward to cabinet. But as drafted, they weren't sufficiently clear to enable cabinet to make a formal decision on them.
Thank you, Catherine.
That's helpful, Chair.
Back to you, Phil.
I think the scrutiny are meeting again soon anyway, or should have met the other night, but and they'll be looking at it again. So might be something more comes out of that. But getting back to this report, Chairman, basically, as you know, the Kia WSP contract has come to an end. And as of Monday, we have a new contract purely and simply with Kia, and WSP are no longer part of it. WSP have been working on a number of projects for us, and they are mainly listed in paragraph 5.3, some examples, where really we need to keep up the momentum. We need to deliver these projects. If we don't continue to go with Kia and basically cease relationships with WSP, we will have to go to another contractor. If we do that, that contractor will go back to the beginning. They will do all the work. I think we all know what happens when people change. We often go back to the beginning, and chances are we'd go back to the beginning if we took on a new contractor at this stage, in which case that will cost the taxpayer a lot more money. So this is basically an interim measure to allow WSP to continue the work that they're doing in these particular areas. All these areas of work that they're doing will be listed and detailed in the contract. So basically, as I say, if we don't do this, we're at risk of the taxpayer having to pay twice. I think the amount involved is probably in the region of 1.5 million, and most of that, I believe, will be coming from 106 funding. I mean, one of the biggest, well, the two big jobs there, Northwest Relief Road and the phase 3 of the A43, all developer led, so that will be funded by 106 money. So although it's 1.5 million, it's a significant part, if not the majority, is being financed by 106 money. So there we are, Chair. The recommendations are that we award a transition contract to WSP via the appropriate framework in order to get on with the work, get it completed, and not have to go back to the beginning on a lot of these projects. So I commend the recommendation, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Phil. Anybody any other comments or questions on this one? No? Okay, recommendations as always are at section 3, which is to agree to award a transitional contract. Can I ask you to confirm your agreement to that recommendation? Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Takes us then on to item 12, which is with Mike. This is the decision that we took under urgency procedures in terms of Microsoft 365 licenses. We have one speaker on this, which is Councillor Al-Wahabi. So Jamal, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. We're back to technology now. I've got a couple of questions of that. If all the public authority use the same supplier, would it be the cost effective? And then Microsoft 365 cost us 1.5 million every year. This is one of many applications we use. What is WNC overall budget for the IT technology? Do we have a renewal and decommissioning policy? When was the last time it was updated? Does each service area have its own IT budget? How did the Microsoft error occur? You carried out investigations. What is the result? How can we make sure that it won't happen again? Is there a contract tracking system? Is it central maintained or kept in each service area? And last question I would like to have, we are paying 1.5 million pounds for Microsoft 365. Is it for license only or license and support? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mike, over to you just to outline, and maybe I saw you typing vigorously, maybe pick up some of those specific questions.
I'll pick those up straight away. Clearly, it includes element of support, as any licensing would as well. To pick up the point around the error in the first place was this. We've been to scrutiny with this, and I see the chair of corporate scrutiny here as well. So we had a good go at evaluating this there already. The error was not in the procurement process. And in fact, the procurement process led to a better value decision coming out of that process. The error was in the end of that process and making sure Cabinet signed off the spend in good time for when the license expired. So this was not an error of procurement process. How what we've done, everything is centrally managed, but we've made sure that that's been re-communicated to the team to ensure that they know that they need to come forward with that decision. So we've lessons learned, and we've applied some lessons from that. In terms of the general IT issues, the IT service budgets are now centrally managed. We've pulled them all together as a result of the unitary authority, which means we can centrally manage the licenses moving forward as well. The renewal and recommissioning policy was all a part of the IT digital transformation strategy, which came to Cabinet, I think last time round, last time we sat. So that's been to Cabinet very recently. If everyone bought from the same supplier, Microsoft supplier, there would undoubtedly be a saving, but it doesn't work like that. We went through this actually scrutiny. I think scrutiny found it quite interesting. What you have is two ways of procuring. You can procure to every man and his dog, which is the open market, or you can procure to a government framework agreement. In this case, the popular one is Crown Commercial Services, which has designated lots for each of these things. And they've already done the procurement exercise and made sure that all suppliers meet the same criteria. So that's what happens here. And, I think nearly every local authority in the country purchases from Crown Commercial Services. The specific budget figure on the IT department budget is 8.3 million. And that's the last of your questions.
Jolly good. Thank you, Mike. I think I covered it pretty comprehensively. Can I ask if any other Cabinet member has any questions or comments to make on this? Yeah. Mike, you pausing there. You've said everything you want to on it, haven't you? Not just answering the questions. You happy then? We go to the vote? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. In which case we have one recommendation, is that the Cabinet notes the decision that was taken. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to that recommendation, please? Is that agreed? Great. Thank you very much. That's good. Takes us on to item 13, which is again a report with Mike. We have a number of speakers on this one, and they are in the following order. First of all, Councillor Sally Beardsworth, Councillor Jonathan Harris, Councillor Bob Purser, Daniel Stone, Keith Holland, Mayor, and finally Councillor Wendy Randall. Sally, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say I really welcome this report tonight. I think it's essential that we should be looking at this. I don't know if you remember in June, the Liberal Democrats brought a motion, a cost of living crisis and we couldn't debate it properly because we ran out of time, so we withdrew it. And we're going to present it again, but I'm really, really glad that this is on the table tonight. I think this is so important that the people out there we represent know that we're trying to do something to help them. Now, I know the government is doing things, but we don't know exactly how much is that's going to help. And at 10.1, it was the last time I checked, which was last week, the cost of living. It's not just heating your homes, it's buying food, it's all the other things. And lots of other councils have done lots of innovative things, warm spaces, looking at how you can help people in different aspects. I'm not going to go through them all tonight because we've got a working group which is going to be set up. And the only criticism I'd have of the working group, and thank you, Stuart, for putting this on the report, because I think it's essential, is that we don't have a timescale. And I must say there is some urgency in this. We must do, if we're going to have an anti-poverty cross-party working group, we must do it soon to actually get some ideas out there to help the voluntary sector, people out there that need help, and actually making some of our forms that we have, and we've talked to Martin about this before, and Belinda Green, our Otis, she's here tonight, about making the council tax one a lot more simple to understand, because I don't think a lot of people have claimed on that yet. And I think there's money there that could be used. And if it's not going to be used, it could be transferred over to help do some of the good works that this group will be setting up. And I think we really need to do things. I'm pleased that there's lots of information in here. I've read it thoroughly, and I'm pleased that the information is correct. But what we need to now is have some good ideas that we should be putting out to the people of Northamptonshire, West Northamptonshire, to say, we understand your difficulty, and as a council, we want to do something to help. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sally. So Councillor Harris, Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. A few points from me, if I may. I also welcome this report and very pleased to see this important issue being brought forward for discussion and debate. A couple of points in specifics to the report itself. Obviously, the report reflects quite a lot around the national initiatives, and I would like to have seen a little bit more on any of the local initiatives, but I hope that through the anti-poverty group coming together fairly soon, I hope we can perhaps get into some more detail there. My specific concern is on the section of drivers or causes, which I personally think is quite narrow in its context. It doesn't fully reflect the reality of many other contributing factors, and I think perhaps oversimplifies. And if I might, I'll elaborate briefly. There are some causes that are unique to the UK over and above the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We do have labour shortages related to foreign workers leaving due to Brexit. Sorry to mention the B word, but it has to be mentioned. There are also obviously additional taxes that have been placed on individuals in this country, and we have lost our gas storage facilities. Now, I'm not raising Brexit as either a pro or anti statement, simply to make the point that I don't think we can afford to bury our heads in the sand. It's rather like Fawlty Towers and not mentioning the war, perhaps. There's an excellent report by the Resolution Foundation, which if this cabinet hasn't seen, I would recommend it. I'd be very happy to circulate it. Now, just to make the point in regards to energy supply, which is the specific point that's referred to on drivers, some of you may have seen statistics circulating. In 2021, Germany got 55% of its gas from Russia, France 17%, the UK 4%. In 2022, energy prices in Germany have risen 23%, in France 4%, and in the UK 215%. It simply cannot be that it is just about the war in Ukraine. A couple of other specific points, if I may. A recent update on the Council of COVID Support Fund. The last check I had, there was 72,000 of that fund left unspent. That's around 29 to 30 councillors. A third of our councillors have yet to allocate those funds. We heard earlier on about the hardship fund seems to not be accessed or accessible for whatever reason. Can I please urge that these funds be pulled from those sources and perhaps put into a pot that would allow the anti-poverty group to identify how these funds could be utilised more effectively? The point I'm trying to make is we shouldn't oversimplify this. It is a complex issue. And whatever political affiliation we should come together to work for our residents on this particular issue. And I hope moving forward that we can all have proper grown-up conversations about this and put some practical actions in place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Purser, Bob.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also drawing on the work of the Resolution Foundation. I think they've got some really sound stuff. My view is that as a local authority, we can only do so much, and that national government has a key role here. And my point really is to urge you to make representations to your colleagues in central government. One issue is how often benefits are reviewed. Ofgem, who review the price cap, are doing that every 6 months. That's primarily actually to protect the financial interests of the energy suppliers. It's government's job to protect the interests of people, and particularly people on universal credit. They will be not updated until April next year, whereas inflation is going on at a huge rate at the moment. I would urge you to ask them for a 6-monthly review of the increases in universal credit, which is related to the increase of inflation. I suppose my second point is the despair about the inaction of government over really a number of months now. We had the paralysis while they decided whether to dispose of their leader. They had a paralysis while they elected a leader. And now we're going to wait till after the party conferences. I commend the decision to hold cabinet this evening. I think that was a good decision. We needed to get on with things. It's bad that government is not going to get on with sorting out what to do about benefits for so many months. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Next is Councillor Stone. Danielle.
Thank you, Chair. If I talk quickly, it's because I don't want you to cut me off again. I'm referring to 5.1.2, the drivers that are causing these issues are really, really important. If we don't clearly understand them, we're going to be incapable of meeting the challenge. The Office for Budget Responsibility says Brexit will have a long-term effect of cutting UK GDP by 4%. The Financial Times says such a decline amounts to 100 billion in lost output and 40 billion less in revenue to the Treasury. They comment further that leaving the EU has made it harder to recruit skilled workers as we no longer benefit from free movement of labour. I want to see impact on us because of Brexit put in all our reports. I think we need to know so that we can deal with it. And I think the public needs to know that as well. A 5.16 mention is made of poorer households with less income. But, you know, the impacts of the cost of living crisis is affecting all of us, and it's going to affect more affluent households with bigger houses and more properties as well. 5.23 is interesting. It says that we've got 13,000 children living in poverty. We've just received the Youth Justice Plan, which tells us at least 20,000 children are living in poverty. Again, I think these kind of things are really, really important for us to understand. We need to know what the actual figures are so that we know the scale of the problem facing our children and the job that we have got to do. The recent government support grant hasn't benefited all households, you know. It's been really problematic in its delivery. Lots of people, including unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, haven't received the vouchers. Care leavers have fallen through the net, as have many people with no recourse to public funds. And people who are not networked have fallen through the net. I think we should be making representation to government to make sure anything that happens like that goes directly into people's bank accounts. We can cut out all the cost of that administration and all the extra turmoil it causes within our organisation, but in all the voluntary sector. I understand 6.31 that Revs and Bens is in deep trouble at the moment with a shortage of staff, high absence and sickness rates, and a major trade union dispute to deal with. Can I suggest this gets referred to corporate scrutiny to have a look at, please? DHPs, could we please have a breakdown of how this funding is spent? I'm interested in how much goes to individual households, how much goes to supported living providers, how much to private landlords, and how much we're spending of that on temporary accommodation. 6.5, poverty hurts. Are we going to be leading by example and making a financial contribution to Community Foundation? 14% of vouchers dealt with through schools weren't redeemed. Do we know why? Can I just say there's a little thing in the report that says there are no cost implications. There are cost implications for what we're doing for staff, for services, and for our budget. And I think we need to be really clear about that. I'm interested to know why health isn't making a contribution to this agenda. It says very clearly in the report they've got a lot to gain from it. If people are looked after better, their health is better, and there's every reason why they should be making a contribution.
Thank you. Councillor Holland-Mayor, Keith, over to you.
Just in terms of the administrative burden of the rollout of the Housing Supports Fund to the voluntary and community sector, from the experiences I've heard firsthand from the sector, there has been a great deal of time and effort that's been used up by the voluntary sector for the delivery of the voucher schemes. Much of that is basically provided by them for free, but it has diverted them from their main funding provision and the main services they provide. And also I think in terms of the impact they've found on the difficult conversations they've had to go through, the fraud checks and various other administrative burdens, it has, for a sector that relies heavily on volunteers, it has been quite a distressful and difficult time for those volunteer organisations. And I would urge, in terms of any future rollout of the scheme in future funding streams, we really do need to learn lessons, and the fact that we can't just believe that the voluntary sector is going to provide effectively administration for free on behalf of the council, with a real impact on the core services that they provide to their communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Last speaker is Councillor Randall. Wendy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure all of us in this room are really, really concerned about what is going to happen over the winter months. But I'm sure that many, many more people are going to be plunged into poverty. I'm already hearing of people that can't afford to put fuel in their car to get to work. I am concerned that once the weather starts to get cold and people are going to start turning off their heating, there's going to be a lot more mold appearing in the homes, which is going to affect people's health, especially children. Food banks are already telling me they're considering closing, reducing their days that they're open because they're seeing food diminishing. I know the council do lots of referrals, and that's easy enough to do a referral, but it's no good referring people if there is no food for people to have when they get there. So, you know, I don't know what the answer is. Obviously, you've all got MPs in government. I would all urge you to get your MPs to be saying that we need more money coming into this council. We're one of the lowest councils for funding, I understand. So please, you know, please plead with them just to say to give us more money to help, you know, all of our residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Quite a few comments there. We'll hand over to Mike in a second. I think on the urgency thing, that's a very fair point. So we would say, yes, we'll be doing that urgently. Stuart, we can just say that, can't we? We'll come up with a date pretty soon. Apart from that, there was some financial stuff, grant processes, figures and so on. It might be that Martin and Malcolm wants to comment, but Mike, your report mainly, should we start with you?
Yeah, what I thought I'd do is go through the comments one by one and then ask Councillor Golby and Stuart to chip in. And then on the Revs and Ben's point, perhaps get Martin to chip in as well around that. But if we go through one by one and then they can individually pick up on the things that they picked up on. Where we came from this was really from a customer service perspective, because we have noticed an uptick in calls. And when you look at the data, it's not in necessarily the areas you would expect. We're getting quite late calls, late in a process of struggling calls from all manner of different areas of West Northamptonshire. So just to cover off the points in one by one, Councillor Bearsworth mentioned timescale. Well, we've already actually started. I mean, Stuart will refer to the anti-poverty stuff, but all of this work is already well underway. I particularly wanted to point out, it's mentioned in the report, that what I'm calling the customer service roadshows, where really we're getting out and about within the community to take that one-stop shop facility out and about. We've done various ones now in Brackley and Malton. I think, Leader, you went to one at East Hunsbury, working with the parish council. So there's lots we can do to be really proactive and get out there and try and identify those people for support earlier. What we've seen so far is people coming to us quite late, where we could have helped them a little bit earlier. So I think that's a really big thing. I signed off an approach to a customer service roadshow in Far Cotton only yesterday. That's going to be one of the next ones that we do. So we'll be really focusing on those to be proactive on our support. And what I've said on this is, if you're struggling and you're in, say, Middleton Cheney, very unlikely that you're going to get in the car and drive all the way to Northampton to the one-stop shop. So it's really important that we get out on the road, and we've already been doing that. Councillor Beardsworth, form simplification, absolutely talking the same language as me. And I would add to that, let's make the form really simple for those that want to access it digitally, those that want to access it on their mobile phone, and those that want a hard copy. Fundamental part of our strategy, we'll give you a hard copy, but we'll make it really simple. So that's a good point to pick up. A few of these points start to veer into the national debate and into politics, and I'll try and avoid it getting into any big political discussions on this if I can, but I think I'm going to touch on it. Councillor Harris, you mentioned local initiatives. The Council COVID Fund, that's an interesting one, and I'll pick up on that with Councillor Longley. It might be that we could put a deadline on that and then free that pot up for funds that aren't spent. I know we did previously announce, I think we've extended it to this year. I can't speak for myself because my own fund is long since spent. You mentioned contributing factors. The gas storage facility, the government only just announced before the death of the monarch, I think, the reopening of one of those gas storage facilities. So the government's already on the case for this. I've heard a few people try to do what you're trying to do with the statistics around how much the UK pulled from the Russian market, and it simply doesn't work, because whilst we pulled only 4% of our gas from there, the fact that Europe pulled such a heavy amount from there, it moved the market in its entirety. So it's irrelevant really how much we pulled, because it moved the cost of the market upwards. Contributing factors, I don't think we should underplay the effect of the biggest global conflict in Europe since 1945. I think it is a huge factor. It's really important that we consider it. And it's important that we emphasize that. I think sometimes people have thought, oh, because the theatre of conflict is so far away, they don't think it's infecting us, but it certainly is. It's infecting us like a war that we've never seen before. It's infecting us in cyberspace, and it's affecting us in this economic element of the war as well. So it's really important that we take those geopolitical considerations into account. But I really welcome ideas for local initiatives like your suggestion around the Councillor COVID Fund. So let's keep those suggestions coming, and we'll see what we can do. Councillor Purser, a little bit disingenuous, I feel, in that to say that the government hasn't done anything on this, when actually the government announcement on this was actually interrupted by the sad death of the monarch. So the government has already taken action, and actually, unless you've heard otherwise today, I believe that the Prime Minister said that the fiscal statement is still due next week, and they'll carry on with that fiscal statement once the events of the monarchy are out of the way. Moving on then, so Councillor Stone, drivers and Brexit, and it's hard not to get into a political argument here. We are always going to differ on this, so that's fine. You can differ with people on different arguments. Today, hopefully you saw the news that we have the lowest level of unemployment in this country in nearly 50 years. There are lots of positive benefits to Brexit, and it's just tiring to hear people groan on about what they perceive as the negatives. You talked about health benefits. We had the fastest rollout of the vaccine in Europe. So these are all benefits of not being in this European Union. So we could probably debate until late into the early hours about the benefits or the negatives of Brexit. So let's not do that, because I think everybody else probably wants to get home at some point. Revenues and benefits. I'm sure Martin will come in on this, but I don't think the picture has changed in there recently. And Martin, I'll ask you to comment specifically. Ideas around the community foundation. Yeah, I'm sure we can work some stuff out with that if we can free up budget from somewhere. I'm sure that's the type of ideas that we need to put on the table. So I really welcome those. Councillor Hollandella, Mayor, voluntary and community time and effort. Big thanks to them, you know, a big up to all of the efforts and all of the things that they do in this, because it's not been easy for anyone, but nobody predicted this. Nobody predicted a pandemic that would then merge into the largest global conflict in Europe and an economic war over gas. So nobody predicted this. So it's been difficult for everybody involved. And I think it's fair to say lots and lots of people are trying their absolute best to help as many people as they can. And we welcome and support that. Councillor Randall, on your points on heating and fuel to get to work, I guess the heating point, the government is obviously addressing that with the announcement last week, and then we'll hear next week with the fiscal statement about actually the financial ins and outs of that. So, Leader, with your permission, I'll perhaps pass over to Martin first to touch on revenues and benefits, and then we could refer to the adult social care team.
That's great, Mike. Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin.
Yes, thanks very much. Thanks, Mike. I think it's fair to say that the benefits team that we've got at the moment is going through a state of change. We've brought 3 different operating models together. We're trying to move it into one way of operating, so we have one set of processes and one set of systems, and it will take a bit of time to go through that. I deal with facts, and yes, we are seeing some sickness within the service. We are seeing some vacant posts within the service. I'd be delighted to bring a factual report back into corporate scrutiny so we can go through that. I think what it will show is that if we look at unallocated payments now compared to last year, it'll be much lower in terms of volumes and in terms of value. And I've just pulled up the information in terms of the latest performance for collection of council tax and collection of business rates. And it doesn't appear to me that the service is in crisis at all. In fact, they're performing very well at the moment. So if we look at council tax collection rates, the Q1 target is 29.73%. Our collection rate, in spite of the cost of living crisis, is at 29.28%. So very, very marginally behind the actual target that we've got. And in terms of business rate collection rates, the Q1 target is 28.78%, and we're above that. So we're at 30.07%. So in spite of there are some challenges in the service and there are some difficulties, in spite of the vacant posts, in spite of a level of sickness absence, the Assistant Director of Benefits, who's here this evening, is doing a remarkable job, and I think those performance figures bear that out. So we'd be more than happy to bring that information into corporate scrutiny.
That's excellent, Martin. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Did you chaps want to comment at all, Matt, perhaps? Or...
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First off, I just wanted to support Mike in bringing this paper to Cabinet. I think it really does show as an authority what we have been doing. We can't solve everything. We can implement as much as we can. And going back to when we brought the anti-poverty strategy back to Cabinet, you know, earlier this year, I think as a council we've been as proactive as anybody in the country. To show that, you know, we know that some people are struggling out there, and we're going to do everything we can with our partners to do what we can to assist them. And Leader, you were at the Health and Wellbeing Board last week, and we had a summary of the anti-poverty strategy and all the action plan, and it was extremely comprehensive, and it said a huge amount and was testament to some of the great work that our officers are doing. And I look forward to convening that cross-party group that has done a really good job, you know, to really take this agenda forward and build on the work that we've already done. I was keen, we've talked about the Household Support Fund too. I've been keen ever since we again brought that to Cabinet here in June to make sure that runs as smooth and as efficiently as possible. And I've had regular updates through Stuart and the team that have been administering the fund, and I'll be putting some facts and figures down in my report that comes to council on the 27th. And the point was made about the NCF and the Community Foundation and their involvement. I think they've been extremely efficient. the grants that they've been put across. I think they've used all of their money up, which is great, but also demonstrates the need and the involvement that they've had. And of course, I think there was a management fee or a mechanism for them to draw down some cost to cover what they need to administer the fund. And also, just finally, I think a big part of this and how we're going to work with our communities, with the LAPs that we talked about as a part of the ICS and the ICP that again we've brought to Cabinet, will really join up all this work and get right down into our communities based on the determinants of what's influencing poverty and need within our communities. And I really think that we'll be able to start and make a real focused difference in our communities and respond to the needs as we move forward. But yeah, I just wanted to thank Mike and everybody for the work that's going in. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, absolutely. Stuart, anything to add there? We've already said about the urgency on the anti-poverty bit. Over to you.
Just one addition, Leader. So the government has announced that there will be a household support fund round 3. We haven't had full and final details pertaining to the scale of the grant that we will be provided with in West Northants, but we have talked about how we would use that anti-poverty task force as that oversight group to really influence how we take forward interventions around that round 3, really learning from what we've done through the allocation of rounds 1 and 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stuart. Adam, you're going to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just in my role as the Cabinet Member for Housing, the cost of living crisis has been a concern to me for many months, and I regularly have catch-ups with MPH, and I check on the welfare of tenants who are of course our own tenants as we are the landlord for those people. The good news is that for the time being, at least, rent arrears remain pretty much as low as they've been over the past few years in terms of payments being made by residents to NPH. But we have also been in anticipation of potential further difficulties to come. We've been in discussions for some time with NPH and senior management there around the kind of support that we may be able to offer in the months ahead. Now, we've not reached a final decision on that, and I'm not going to preempt a final decision by setting any heads running tonight, but I wanted to reassure people that we take the welfare of our own tenants very seriously indeed, and we've been involved in those discussions for quite some time. We've also been in contact with our other registered providers to ensure that they've got things in place to support their tenants. Just a couple of points, Chairman, around the larger issues that were raised. I think to say that the government haven't done very much is grossly unfair. I think we've seen state intervention at a level that is almost unprecedented in peacetime. That the amount of financial support being given to people up and down the country is in fiscal terms quite eye-watering, but is absolutely the right thing to do, given the motivating factor of the war in Ukraine and other matters out of the control of the UK government. Councillor Randall said that you, speaking to us as a cabinet, have MPs in Westminster. Well, we all have MPs in Westminster. I'm sure Chris Heaton-Harris would welcome a letter from Councillor Randall, and all MPs would welcome the advice and the input from representatives of the public, as we all are. Councillor Stone made a very specific request that we include an assessment of the impact of Brexit on all reports. Quite frankly, Chairman, I couldn't think of a worse use of the resources of our officers in the finance team. They have an immense amount of work to do. They've got an awful lot of work underway on many fronts. We don't need to distract them with party political pet projects such as that.
Thank you, Adam. Do you have any further comments at all? Questions on this one? No, in which case, the recommendations, as always, are at section 3, which is first of all to note the report and task the all-party anti-poverty working group to oversee the actions planned for the next year. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to those recommendations? Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, that was the last of our public items of the agenda. So we now move into the private session, and you will hopefully all know that we don't do this lightly. We only do this when we consider there is information that might inhibit the opportunity of getting best value for the public. So if I may ask, please, that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that if the public were present, it would be likely that exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of the schedule of 12A